All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. First one, hey David, why is the educational divide among white voters not there among non-white voters? This is a really good question. It may be the wrong question in a sense, and I'll explain that in a minute. But first, let's discuss what we're talking about here. We recently did a story which looked at polling in terms of Trump support. And what you saw was that among black voters basically opposed Trump by in similar proportions, regardless of whether they did or didn't go to college. Hispanic voters are opposed to Trump roughly equally between Hispanic voters who didn't go to college and Hispanic voters who did, etc. Within white voters who didn't go to college are significantly more likely to support Trump than white voters who did go to college. So one way to ask it is, why is there an educational divide among white voters on supporting Republicans? The way it may be backwards is, maybe the question is, what is it about white voters where when they aren't educated, they are falling for Republican talking points? But essentially, we're asking the same thing here. Now, there's a few things that aren't good answers. One would be, it's merely about religion. Because if you look at black voters are a pretty significantly religious group. They should be more conservative than they are based on religiosity, if that was sort of the X factor. It doesn't appear to be. When you look at Hispanic voters, education doesn't become a dividing line, I believe, because regardless of educational attainment, Hispanic voters know that Republicans don't have their interests in mind. They don't propose policies that are good for them. And Hispanic voters, regardless of education, aren't likely to fall for bogus Republican talking points like the left is really the racist party or whatever the case may be. The educational element becomes sort of secondary with a lot of these other groups. With white voters, the educational differences become more of a dividing line because nothing else is bringing educated and uneducated voters together on the same basis. What I mean by that is, I've explained to you many times before, those lame Republican talking points that don't work on Hispanic voters regardless of education, and they don't work on black voters regardless of education, because they understand the political realities of the Republican Party. Those talking points do work on white voters who are not, by virtue of their identity, already understanding Republican versus Democratic policy. And because they are uneducated, they are more likely to fall for those talking points since there is no other sort of insulating factor that will protect them from it. And this becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop where, in great part, the Republican Party has written off a lot of these minority groups. They've written off Hispanic voters and black voters and Asian voters in many ways because they see that their policy isn't appealing. So they're effectively doubling down and trying to appeal to white voters even more. That, of course, leads to a bigger divide because the white voters who are educated have more of a framework with which to understand and realize that there are attempts to bamboozle them, whereas the uneducated voters are not. So we have a combination here of a self-reinforcing feedback loop wherein Republicans are particularly targeting white voters and succeeding more with those that are uneducated, combined with the reality that in a lot of these other groups, there is something else about their place in the political milieu, for lack of a better term, that reduces the importance of whether they are or are not educated. I mean, at a very micro level, I know a lot of Argentinians here in Boston. I was born in Argentina, as many of you know. And in the group, there are drastic financial differences where there are people who are, effectively just entering the workforce or have been in it for a while, but earn very little money, are on social welfare programs, all the way up to medical and legal professionals and successful entrepreneurs, et cetera. And across that entire group, nobody likes Trump. Everybody understands the role that Trump plays in furthering the Republican policies that are not good for Hispanic voters who are immigrants from Argentina, however you want to define us. Many Argentinians are white, as the term is. And the educational level and the class differences that exist within the group don't really seem to move political views one way or the other. If you looked at an equivalent group of native born, American born white people with such drastically different class and educational backgrounds, my prediction is you would see much more of a spectrum of political view. So those are some of my ideas. Let me know what I'm missing. Very important question and an important one to understand when looking at the 2020 election for sure.